Christmas for my grandpa was a long time ago, and he loved to tell me stories about it, especially about the Christmas stocking. There was no fireplace in the old house where my grandpa grew up, but there was a hot air register in the living room, where the heat came up from the wood furnace in the cellar. And that's where my grandpa and his sisters and brothers hung their stocking. A few days before Christmas, they would drive some nails into the wall behind the register. 8 nails, one for each of the kids. Names would be printed on the wall above each nail, and there would be order of age. So my great aunt Bev would be the first one on the left, following my great aunt Mary, and then my grandpa because he is the third oldest, and so on. And then on Christmas Eve, they would hang up the stockings, usually one of my great grandpa's woolen works because they were the biggest they could find. And then everybody would check those stockings very carefully before they went upstairs to bed. And of course, they would hear great grandma warn them not to come downstairs to get those socks before morning. Before morning? Yeah, right. Those boys might wait until morning to get their socks, but it would be a whole lot earlier in the morning than great grandma had in mind. No way were they going to let the girls go downstairs to get their socks first. The plan was to wake up very early and sneak downstairs before the girls did. But there was a problem. There was a big squeak in one of the stairs. So for several days, Grandpa would practice going down those stairs without making that step squeak. Because if it squeaked and his parents heard it, they would order him right back up to bed. And they would be likely to hear it because their bedroom was right off the living room, and they left their door open. Grandpa and Great Uncle Don slept in the bedroom at the head of the stair, and on Christmas Eve, they would take a while getting to sleep, talking over what they expected to happen the next day, and especially how they were going to go down to get their socks before the girls did. Then they would drift off to sleep as the excitement was overcome by drowsiness. Somehow, Grandpa managed to wake up very early, probably as early as he does these days, and he would wake up Uncle Don or try to. Sometimes Uncle Don would be more interested in just sleeping some more. In any case, it would just be Grandpa who would venture down those stairs. It was a very slow trip as Grandpa would do everything possible to avoid making even the least bit of noise. If he had made a bit of noise, he would freeze and wait a minute or two before he would take another step. And remember, the house was totally dark. There were no lights on at all. Not even the lights on the Christmas tree. When he made it to the foot of the stairs, Grandpa would slide along the hallway, barely touching the wall to make sure of where he was. And they slipped into the living room. He had to be very careful not to bump into anything as he made his way to the socks. When he got there, he would find the sock in the dark, check them out and make sure there was something in them. Then he would find his and Uncle Don's. That meant counting over to the third one for Grandpa and the sixth one for Uncle Don. Grandpa would slide them carefully off the nail and make a silent return across the living room, along the hallway, and up the stairs. Once back in the bedroom, Grandpa would turn on the lights, and he and Uncle Don would examine the content of their socks. First thing that came out of the sock was an orange. This was the only orange they would get all year, so it was a big deal. Next out was a small present, maybe a jackknife or a small toy, and the boys would check them out very carefully. The sock also had a variety of candies, probably a barley toy, a pack of gum, or even some of Great Grandma's famous molasses candy. And there were some nuts, mostly peanuts, a walnut or two, almonds, and Brazil nuts. In some ways it doesn't sound like much, but for these boys it was a real treat, and it was enough to hold the boys until they came to wrap the rest of the presents with the whole family when the real morning came, but that's another story.
According to Papa, nobody could possibly be any more impatient than his sisters were on Christmas morning. They were so anxious to get at those presents under the tree, they actually pleaded with their parents to be allowed to open one of them on Christmas Eve. But they always lost that plea, of course. And then on Christmas morning, after they had come downstairs and collected their socks, and maybe grabbed a quick bite of breakfast, they would be after those presents again. There was a procedure to follow, and of course they would never violate that procedure, but they pushed it. The procedure was for Great-Grandpa to hand out all the presents one at a time as he sat in a chair beside the tree. But Great-Grandpa was never in any rush to get out of bed on Christmas morning. To the girls, it seemed to take forever for him to finally appear in the living room. And all that time, they kept reminding him how ready they were. But finally, everything was ready for the presents to be opened. Everybody had some breakfast, at least those who wanted it. Papa went back in the house after finishing the barn chores and tending to the furnace, and Great-Grandpa was at last seated in his chair next to the tree. The children gathered around in eager expectation. One of the girls would reach under the tree, pick up a present, and hand it to her father. He would read the name of the person who it was for and who it was from. Then he would hand it ceremoniously to the person and turned for the next one. And so it went, until all the presents were handed out. It was a slow and steady process. It was possible to keep track of what everybody got as all the presents were unwrapped. Usually none of the presents were big or expensive, but they were all very welcome in a home where there was not much extra money. Everybody would get socks or mittens that Great-Grandma had in it. There were books, toiletry items like soap or combs or hairbrushes for the girls, a few toys, tools, or other useful items, maybe a shirt or two, and a sweater for each girl, things like that. By the time all the presents were unwrapped, it looked like a pretty good day. But not all the presents were opened right away. Papa loved books. He usually got one or two of them. And when Great-Grandpa handed him a book to unwrap, he would open it and start reading. All of his other presents would have to wait until the book was finished. Oh, that would drive his sisters wild. They would beg and plead him to open the rest of his presents because they wanted to see what he had got. But he just kept reading his book. The rest of the presents could wait. Besides, it was fun to see his sisters getting so worked up about it.
Someday I hope I get a taste of the plum pudding that my papa talks about having when he was a little boy. He says Great-Grandma would start making that plum pudding first thing on Christmas morning. She would mix it up and put the batter into a coffee can lined with wax paper. The coffee can went into a pot on the stove and steamed there all morning. Then Great-Grandma, with a little help of some girls, would get the rest of the food ready for dinner. There would be a goose to bake, along with dressing that went into it, and all the vegetables and other goodies. Papa didn't get involved in any of that work. Usually he had to tend to the stove and furnace and make sure there was plenty of firewood. When dinner was ready, everybody rushed to the table. Usually the family ate meals in the kitchen, but for Christmas and when there was company, they ate in the dining room at the big table with all of the leaves in it. Actually, that was a dining room only when the table was set. The rest of the time, it was a living room. Everybody just called it the room. That Christmas table was piled high with wonderful things. There was the goose, of course, and the dressing that was cooked, and don't forget the gravy. Beautiful, delicious goose gravy. There were bowls piled high with mashed potatoes. This was the only day of the year that Great-Grandma would mash potatoes. There were carrots, squash, and other vegetables. There were several kinds of pickles, all made by Great-Grandma in the fall. Everybody ate until it seemed they would burst. It all tasted so good, and then Great-Grandma would bring out the plum pudding, wearing oven mitts. She turned the coffee can upside down, and out came the pudding onto a plate. Great-Grandma sliced it into thick slices, cut each of the slices into quarters, and put each piece onto a saucer. Then she poured her special sauce over each piece and handed it to each of the children. Papa remembers that pudding was being rich and brown and filled with big raisins. The sauce was sweet and thick and vanilla flavored. Papa tells me he is pretty sure his mother's plum pudding will be the dessert of the marriage supper of the Lamb. He says there couldn't possibly be anything better than that.